Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 254 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. As ever, firstly of all, a big thank you goes out to our Patreon supporters and those of you who have visited and purchased from our merch store, details of which will be coming up at the end of this episode. If you happen to live in or maybe visiting East or West Sussex, in the Worthing area in particular, Alison Lapper's exhibition Lost in Paris has moved from the Museum of the Mind to the Worthing Museum. It features round about a dozen paintings that Ali created, trying to come to terms with the loss of her 19-year-old son Paris. The exhibition also features 2 portraits of Ali by Rankin and 2 just smaller than life-size sculptures of Ali by Mark Quinn. One when she was pregnant with Paris and one just soon after, where Paris is sat on her lap. It's a very powerful and emotive exhibition that I highly recommend you go and have a look. And it is supported by the charity that Ali and I are trustees for, which is the Drug of Art. A charity that helps young people use creativity as a tool to coping with their own mental health. But back to today's episode, which is the first of 2 conversations that I had with 2 artists that are showing in the same exhibition, which is a pop-up exhibition at the Sarah Kravitz Gallery in Soho Square from the 9th to the 14th of July. It's called The Weight of Colour, and it has been created by good friends of the podcast 99 Projects, whose main space is over in Kensal Rise and has shown fellow good friends of the podcast Dan Pearce, Maxim, Sarah Pope, Elizabeth Power, Pure Evil, and of course my good buddy Trish Riley. So today, on a run up to the exhibition, I'll be speaking to Rosa Roberts, and next week Luke Hannam. And although Luke mainly paints portraits and Rosa flora and fauna, their approach to painting is quite similar. Bold, confident, colourful textured marks. I'm not sure if they would call themselves Fauvists, but that's what come to mind when I saw their work. And the Sarah Kravitz Gallery is quite an imposing space. But Luke and Rosa's work will definitely calm and control that space. And you're in store for 2 great conversations. So please join me for the first as I spoke with Rosa Roberts. Ah, yes, you are in my ear. There are several questions that I ask each guest. The first being, Rosa, how would you explain what you do to someone that doesn't know your work?
Okay. Well, I'm primarily a painter, and I make colourful, often very textured works, often with a theme or a subject matter that's sort of nature inspired or related. Sometimes there's a lot of plants and foliage in my work. Recently flowers, and I make I work a lot on the texture of the surface that I'm working on. So I work on canvas generally, sometimes card and paper, but I will very often create like a collage base to paint on top of for the texture that it lends the surface. So my paintings often have card layered on them and paper and canvas as well, stuck down onto the surface. And I've started using dried up paint flecks as well. So I mix that in with the paint and I make this really kind of ridged, textured, like bitty surface that sort of resists a smooth application of paint, because I really like that sort of broken up brush marks.
Yeah.
but yeah, there's often a kind of nature plant type theme, I would say, but not
Why
always.
is why is it you thrive for that textured surface, or what, or rather, what made you head towards that textured surface?
Well, actually, it started using the texture in lockdown because I just had cardboard. I sort of didn't have loads of paper and I had cardboard. And I just thought, oh, I quite like the ridges in it and
Yeah,
I quite like the folds in it. And I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe that would make a nice background. So I did one and I was like, that's really, really nice. I really like how that's changed the surface from
yeah,
being completely flat and smooth to, obviously in cardboard you've got the corrugations, and that means that not the whole surface picks up the paint that I put on.
yeah,
It just changes the texture of how the paint sits on the surface, and I really liked it. And I also liked working with the ridges and the folds, and I just thought, oh, this adds something. And since there, it's just kind of grown and grown and grown my use of texture, really. Um, though, funnily enough, this year I have gone back to working on paper, which obviously is completely flat. And I haven't worked on paper for a while. And I don't, that's without collaging the surface at all. But yeah, I,
and how do you cope with that mentally? I know it's not I know I'm making it sound like a traumatic experience, but from seeking texture and then going onto a flat surface,
Mhm.
how do you cope with that?
I just felt drawn to paper again
Yeah,
at the beginning of this year. Something about flowers didn't feel like flowers are so soft and kind of, the petals are so thin and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that. Something about the card felt too heavy for them. So I just wanted to work back on paper. It just felt like paper was the thing that I wanted to use, and so I don't know. I just switched back. I got some paper, and I was just like, right, let's try this with some kind of ink washes on
yeah,
top.
yeah,
And then working with the layering of the acrylic paint and the different types of materials that I then work on top. So it was nice. And it was what I wanted. It was the effect that I wanted, So I
brilliant.
sort of went back. But then I've started building in texture on canvases in a slightly different way. Like I was talking about the paint flecks and stuff. So as opposed to like a layer of card underneath, more bitty, if you see what I mean,
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
broken
yeah,
up and sort of like what would you call it? Like flecks, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it just depends what I'm sort of feeling like.
Can I take you back a little? Now we've established what and who you are as an artist.
Hmm.
Was there creativity in home growing up?
Yeah, there was. So my mum is a photographer and has been a photographer for her whole career. My dad is, well, he's a gardener now, but he was a farmer back then. Um,
Same job, but just scaled down a lot.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. A plantsman, So
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
thought plants and gardening, that's quite a creative sort of thing as well. I mean, farming, I guess, as well, in a way. Um, but the visual creativity, there were books and there were paintings, and you know my mum was always very creative with our home environment and stuff
yeah,
like that, and she always did up the houses that we lived in and things like that. So there was always a sense of making things. And my mum used to produce her own photographic series when I was very young. And so, she sometimes commissioned a gypsy wagon to be built. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the scale actually was quite the scale of her ambition, and the productions that she used to that produce for the shoots herself were really quite amazing, and I
yeah,
just grew up in that. And then she had lots of creative friends, artists and people who sort of do textiles and all sorts of things. So I really did have a lot of that around me. Yeah. So I was very lucky, and I think Then my brother went to art school, and then he got in, and I thought, oh well, if he gets in, I can get in.
Yeah, because that's how it works.
Yeah. I was like, oh, it can't be that hard.
What sort of farm was it?
It was a fruit farm.
Fruit.
So yeah, strawberries, asparagus,
Brilliant.
plums, and yeah, fruit in Norfolk.
Oh, Norfolk. Okay, I thought you was going
Yeah.
to say Kent then when you said strawberries.
Oh no, yeah, Norfolk, East Anglia.
Excuse me. Um, so it's as if you've taken parts of both your parents' life into your
Yeah,
work.
actually, now you say it like that, yeah, I hadn't ever thought about it like that. But yeah, I mean, the practical side, my mum, and I feel like I've just like a sense of a natural sense of composition and things like that, and color. I
Yeah.
feel like that has probably come from my mum. And then the plants. I mean, that is just I hadn't even thought about that in my dad
Oh,
before,
there
really,
you
but
go.
it's true, yeah. And but I've always been drawn as well to greenery. And maybe that's to do with growing up in the country, but greenery. I've loved going to kind of tropical places on holiday and stuff, and that's always been very inspiring for me. Um, and I also just kind of tend to think, oh God, I always want to see pictures of green, and I always seek out green and I'm drawn to green space and green places and plants, and I have lots of plants in my home and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It feels kind of soothing and um, nurturing to me. Uh, and just kind of natural and just like also like it's just our habitat and
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how you're always drawn back to green. Where was it? Do you still live in Norwich now?
no,
Not Norwich, Norfolk, sorry.
no, I've lived in London since I was we moved as a family. My dad sold the farm and we moved as a family when I was in my teens. So now I'm in South
Okay.
London.
Would that be why you're drawn back to the nature because of coming away from it as a teen, do you reckon?
Very possibly. I think my mum always made sure that we lived near a green space in London because
Yeah,
we were from the country. And I've always found that very important. And I've always gone back I always go to the parks and stuff like that. Like at the moment, I'm going like every single day to the nature reserve kind of thing. You know what I mean?
yeah,
First thing in the
yeah,
morning. Like I just find it's something that I crave.
yeah. Just have this pull to the outside.
Yeah, pull to the outside, but also greenery, nature, wild places, and like away from. I find I live in Croydon, right, which is like super grey. The town centre itself, like it's very kind of concretey,
Yeah,
and my studio is also quite grey as well. It's a modern building, and it's like got again concrete and stuff like that in it. You know, it's nice, but it's sort of grey, and I'm someone who really struggles with the greyness in the winter, and like too much grey, I just find it like so depressing. But I feel like if I go out to nature and I get brightness in my eyes, that like does something for me.
yeah, like almost like a drug.
Yeah, like it clears me out. It just inspires me. It makes me happy, really. So yeah, it is something that I've always sought out and kept quite close to.
How did you find moving from Norfolk to London? Was it much of a culture shock?
Yeah, it was quite a culture shock. I'd say the most difficult thing about it was the change of school, because I just didn't know really who I was when I changed schools at that age. Yeah, 16 it was. So it's like, that time after GCSEs to A level.
Ah, so it's quite late in your school, or at the end of your school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
that's a hard time to
it
fit
was
in, isn't it?
difficult, and I just didn't really know who I was. So I think coming out of a place where I'd had all my friends around me, and you know who you are when you're sort of in a certain group, and then
Yeah,
when I was taken out of that and put into a completely different culture, really, and it was a boys' school as well, so they'd only just started taking girls, and I'd gone from a girls' school into a boys' school basically, and I just was quite shy, I think.
yeah.
in a different culture where the values were different, the music was different, like the fashion was different,
The
like
attitude,
and
the
it was
kids'
like
attitude is going to be very different, isn't it?
yeah, that was quite a hard
What
transition.
part of London was that?
That was, well, I went to school in Battersea. I lived in Clapham.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it was
Clapham's
difficult.
pretty central, isn't it? And
Yeah,
it can be a hard place, Clapham, and coming from somewhere that wasn't like that, yeah, that's
yeah.
a
It
hard
was
thing.
it was a hard transition. But then at the same time, like I think, I don't know, in a way it was sort of going out into the world before the end of school, if you see what I mean. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like you think I was in quite a cozy environment, you know, and then it's like, oh, okay, there's so much broader life, really. Um, so I sort of had that awakening that maybe some people get more when they go to uni, you know?
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, that bit of
Yeah.
freedom.
Yeah, freedom but more like a sense of, oh, the world is so much broader and wider than where I'd been living, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. I know you went on to art school, but at
Yeah.
what point did you think that a career in art could be for you?
Do you know what? I think it's something that I'd always really wanted. Like, I always used to read fashion magazines and dream of, like, I just knew that that was where my passion lied,
Yeah,
in sort of like the visual worlds, really. Um, and then when I came out of art school, I was working as an artist for a bit, but then I found it very, like, I got completely overwhelmed when I left art school and got into the world in London and just felt like, oh man, how on earth am I going to make this happen? How on earth am I going to break into these galleries and stuff like that?
yeah.
I was like a kind of 23-year-old, I guess. So then I kind of decided I wasn't going to do it and I was going to go into like being an estate agent, right? So I completely pulled, like, I was like, right, no, that's too dodgy. I'm not doing that. And I just couldn't understand it. You know what I mean? How do
Yeah.
you get your head around how to build that kind of career? Because no one tells you how, really. Anyway, so then I did that for a bit and then I realized that my soul was dying being an estate agent. And I just, like, there was no way that
You
I
could
could do
feel it
that.
slowly ebbing
I was
away.
just like, you know what? There was this. You remember Amy Winehouse was big at the time, right?
Yeah,
When I was an estate agent, I couldn't listen to Amy Winehouse because it reminded me of who I
got
was.
you. I know,
I was
I know.
like, I can't hear that right now because I'm doing this.
Yeah,
And then, like 3 months into it, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. And I moved to France for a couple of years with the idea of starting a business with my mum. After a while in France, I started making work again. And I was kind of working as a chambermaid in a hotel and trying to set up this business with my mum. But actually, it was after I decided to not set up the business with my mum anymore. And I got back to making work. I sort of had some mental space, I think. And I was living near the sea and I was swimming every day and stuff. And it was just like, it was always there, that drive to kind of make
yeah, yeah,
work. And then I had a job where I was only working in the mornings and I could paint kind of in the afternoons and stuff like that. And also, I think for me, having that break from London and a sort of like, it was a bit of a media break. There was just less mental noise for me in France because, like, though I did speak all right French, I didn't really understand like the advertising and I didn't
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah,
TV really. I remember being inspired to make landscapes, right? And I went, like, because the south of France is really beautiful. And I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
oh, these are so nice. I'd really like to make landscapes. But I felt very conflicted because I was like, I went to Central St. Martin's and it was like no one was making landscapes. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
felt so kind of like uncool and like uncontemporary. And I was like, I felt really weird about wanting to make a landscape. But I did some. I realized, like, oh, I can actually do this if I want. There is no right and wrong. And just because my tutors had a certain preference for something at the college that I went to, it doesn't mean that I can't now do this because this is my life and I can actually do what I want to do. That's quite common, I think, coming out of art school. It's like art school's its own sort of environment. And then you come out and you're like, you have to really find out who you are without all that input from tutors and their opinions and your peers and stuff like that. So then I started making work again in France, and then I sort of had quite a kind of arty crew around me, and one of the artists there, he had a big studio and he gave me a show in his space. I sold a few bits, and I was kind of living as an artist for a while on the off season when the hotels were, during the winter and stuff, when my hotel was closed down, making enough money to just about get by. But it was tough, it was like I didn't have much money at all, but I had enough for the basics. And I used to just work in my room. I just paint in my bedroom. And then I don't know, I came back to, so I guess in the answer to your question, like it's always been there. Do you know what I mean? For me, it was just finding a way where I could find the time and I guess sell enough paintings to make it work. So that, anyway, I came back from France and I ended up starting a teaching business after a couple of years, running drawing workshops in museums in London, right? And then I did that for a long time. And the idea of that was to paint in the time that I had around it. And you can a bit, but, it was kind of more of a hobby at that time, because I realized you can't really run two businesses at the same time. And for me, being an artist is really like just running a business. It's like, I mean, obviously there's a more vocational side to it, but you don't have enough time to produce, market, and, do that for two businesses. So the teaching business took over, and then come the pandemic, that's when I went full time. And that was when I felt I had enough momentum. I had a good studio that I wasn't really able to use because I was working too busy on my other business. And I just decided at the pandemic, right, let's just give this a go, do it full time. And then there was the artist support pledge online, and that helped me sell during the pandemic. And then there was kind of just enough momentum in it to make me think, right, I'm going to shut the other business down and I'm just going to go for it now,
Yeah, well, that's the one positive that creatives can take out of the pandemic, was that bit of having free time. Because normally creatives try and put it in, as you mentioned, in and around life itself. But when you're given time like that
focus, I just never had focus like it, and all the other distractions. And I was in the same position where I had basic money. I had a bit of money left over from my old business, and then I was able, with the artist support pledge, to make enough to pay the bills. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like a constant panic, like, oh shit, like, I've got to go and do a bit of that, and I've got to go and do a bit of that, and I've got to go and do a bit of that, And so I just had that. It was like maybe a.
it's as if you was in a cocoon, isn't it? And come out something else at the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. And my work really changed in that time, and my work has very much changed doing it every day compared to working in a more sporadic way, which I used to when I was doing it around everything else. It's been able to develop and get deeper, and kind of just I've been able to really hone ideas. That's why these days I'm quite strict with myself about not doing really other work at all, just making it work. Do you see what I mean? Because I just feel like I have a certain amount of focus, and if I put that on some other job because I need money and I feel like I can get it easily there, then it's like, well, but then that's time taken away from this business. Do you see what I mean? And yeah, I so I am protective of my focus now. Now that I have it, now that I have this full time situation, I kind of think, right, well, that's it. I'm not giving it up. You know what I mean?
Excellent.
Even in the hard times.
Love it. Which piece, Rosa, that you've created, do you think has got the strongest emotional connection, be it to you or someone else?
I don't know. The one that's sort of springing to mind is it's a large it's called papaya on blue and green, but it was one of the large pieces, one of the first large pieces in this kind of latest period since lockdown, really. And it was so it's got a papaya in it and a pot,
I know
and
it.
it's a still life,
Yeah,
a
yeah, I know
big
it.
big still life. And I feel like it's just it's a bright happy piece, like most of my pieces are quite sort of bright and happy, really. But I think that was quite a breakthrough piece because it made me remember the power of making large pieces, and that actually I've always been quite drawn to that impactful kind of large pieces that then play around with scale in the with the stuff around them. Because everything sort of looks smaller in comparison to this huge big
Yeah,
papaya
yeah,
that I've drawn, kind of thing.
yeah,
So I think that piece really, I would say, just because it was like, like, yeah, you know, when you kind of you get something which sort of, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I've meaning to say.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Um, and then that was quite that. I think that led on to a series of kind of bigger works, which I just love the impact of big works, really.
They do feel very different, don't they?
Yeah, I
They're like, because I've seen that you work in both directions. It's either very large or small scale, and
yeah,
both of them have quite an impact in
yeah.
obviously in opposite ways.
And those pieces, they always kind of people like them and respond to them. They like that scale kind of thing.
Yeah,
And I like it too. And I think it's fun playing around with like me looking small compared to big objects, you know.
yeah,
And I've done that always actually. I did that in my degree show. I played around with kind of trompe l'oeil, and I made this big like magazine that was like sort of 6 meters wide kind of thing. It was an interiors magazine with like
yeah. I
it was
know it.
looking at, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it was uh, a German apartment, like in an
yeah,
interior
yeah,
magazine, and it was just huge, you know. And I've always sort of been interested in that scale and how that changes things, and how you can change the context of something by changing its size, you know, and
yeah.
saying, look at this, look at it this big, and then what does it say then, you know? Um,
Because I find large paintings literally breathtaking. Like, I can feel my pulse racing when I'm in front of a large painting, or
yeah,
not. If it's a mural, it's a different sort of effect for some reason. But if it's on canvas or what have you,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
I remember going to the Tate to see Matisse's work there, and there was a whole room where he had this canvas that was going like along like two or three walls where he'd made it in his studio, and there was even a door cut in it. I don't know if you saw it yourself. There was an
oh,
actual door cut in it with a door handle missing.
oh my
So
god,
where he was obviously going in and out of his studio
oh my
and
god,
just cut a bloody door in this. But it's yeah, it really sort of it's like walking into a cathedral for me, when you're
yeah,
overtaken and when your work is at that large scale, your work personally, it's like going into an orangery or um uh walking into a part of nature with this big tree or what have you in front of you.
yeah. You know, your memory of that Matisse reminds me of me when I went to the Tate Modern, and I saw that big Rothko room. Do you know the
Yeah,
Rothko
yeah,
room?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Maroon Rothkos,
yeah,
and you're sort of surrounded by them. And I think he made them for a restaurant, but they're just enormous. And that was the first time, really, where I really, well, one of the first times I had seen some large Monet paintings as well, but it was one of the first times where I really felt the power, like the emotional power of those paintings and being sat in relation to them with them all around me, kind of thing.
yeah.
And I think that was quite impactful, you know.
Yeah,
And
I think I find it impactful because I'm quite intimidated by a large canvas. Not that I've painted for years, But yeah, when I do, it's probably about a meter is as big as I'd feel comfortable with, but feel intimidated by a large canvas.
Yeah, yeah. I do still get intimidated by large canvases. I have to say. I have to kind of like work myself up to them. Do you know what? I think the thing is that physically I find big canvases quite difficult to work with because I only have an arm width that's a certain width, and I'm like not the strongest person in the world. Do you know what I mean? So that's often why it's so like that large one that we've been talking about, the papayas on blue and green, that's on two canvases because they're much easier for me to physically move. But
Yeah,
also I like the working in a diptych white
yeah,
way.
yeah.
But
We've mentioned a few other artists there. A question that I do ask each guest is if there was you and five other artists, past or present, what would your ideal group show be?
all right, all right. Well, okay, I'm gonna say Picasso, Matisse, then
Brilliant.
I'm gonna say Florence Hutchings, and I'm also gonna say Luke Hannam because he's one of my favorites. And who would the other one be? Someone else who works a lot with big color and shape, probably Rothko, actually. I mean,
Brilliant.
he's another massive favorite of mine, though I don't feel like there's a massive link between our work or anything like that, but I just feel he was so brilliant with color and form and simplicity and like, yeah, I really, really love him.
Well, obviously you mentioned Luke there, Luke Hannam.
Yeah.
When I saw that you two will be showing together, when this comes out, funnily enough, your work, they could sit well next to each other. The looseness, the colour, the boldness, the everything is it's just an ideal match. Was you put together, could I ask, or did you know each other and come together that way?
Well, what happened, it was a slightly convoluted journey. I Francis got in touch and offered me this show and
Is that
I
that's Francis at 99 Projects?
yeah, Francis and Anna,
Yeah,
AC Ursinus, I think is how you pronounce it.
yeah,
And I thought that I didn't want to do a solo show because it was too much. I didn't have enough work and I didn't want to be super stressed making the work. So I actually asked someone else first, Neve, who I'd recently been to New York with and whose work I absolutely love as well. And then actually Alice ended up pulling out for personal reasons. And when Alice pulled out, I thought, well, the one person I'd really love to do it with is Luke. And I got in touch with him and he was up for it. And so I was like, oh, amazing. This is great. His work really spoke to me. I love the energy in it. And I just think he's, I really admire the way I think he's got so much skill with faces,
yeah.
which I find very difficult. I know he just has a kind of ease with that. And then I love his colors. I love his use of like I really like it. You know, it speaks to me. So I kind of really pushed for him and I wanted to work. I wanted to be inspired by it, if you see what I mean, and
Yeah,
have that work to look at and kind of give me ideas and stuff. So I was like, yeah, well, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And then they kind of like looked into his work and they were like, yeah, okay, yeah, cool, cool. And then I felt so happy because I wanted to, like I said, I just wanted to work with that work, you know what I mean, in my head. And it has influenced my work for this show quite a lot
yeah.
with the colours and things and that I've started using. And I was looking for that, you know, I wanted to look at Luke's work and sort of study it a bit and see like take bits, you know.
And what a coup for Luke, really, to have someone say, "I love your work. Would you show with me?" out the blue at this great gallery.
Well, I mean, but you never know how people are going to respond. So I was just over the moon that he was up for it,
Yeah,
because I kind of like, I didn't, it was a bit last minute by then, really. And I told him that I was going to be doing flowers, and he was like, "Oh, do you want me to do flowers?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, if you want, but you don't have to."
yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I'll just make some more work." And I was like, "Okay, I mean, as long
Okay.
as you're cool with that, you know what I mean." But he felt like he was up for it. He was excited. He had energy for it. He was, he made new work, and it was just one of those sort of lucky things, really. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, he had the time, and it worked out. So yeah, I'm just excited. Yeah, I'm really excited by the pairing. I'm excited to see the works together, and yeah, just how they talk to each other.
Because
Yeah.
this show isn't going to be at 99 Projects base, is it? In
It's
Kensal
going to
Rise.
be, no, it is going to be at Sarah Kravitz Gallery in Soho Square.
Yeah.
So yeah, really nice central location. And so 99 Projects and Anna are doing a pop-up in Sarah Kravitz Gallery.
Which is a cool space.
Yeah.
When does it open?
It opens on the 9th of July and it goes till the 14th. So it's only on for quite a short time.
Yeah.
Um, and the 14th is by appointment only, so it's a Sunday. So if you want to come on the 14th, you need to make sure that you get in touch with Anna and Francis.
How many works are you putting in?
About 4 large ones, and then some small ones, and even a few bits on paper which are going to be available in the show, but they're not actually going to be up in the show.
Yeah.
And there's 1 or 2 which are older pieces as well. So actually, that piece that we've been talking about, that large papaya and
Yeah.
pot piece, and the rest are all flowers, which I resisted doing flowers for ages. And then at the beginning of this year, I did a workshop online. Like, I ran a workshop online for this company called Still, who do online workshops with artists, like a bit of a look behind the scenes at their
Yeah.
process and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Really nice workshops. And as part of that, I did this pot. It just sort of came out because we were working from a still life, and it came out, and I did it with black and white stripes. I just had this kind of like instinctive thing, do this black and white stripes, and it was on uh like a piece of card with lots of chunks of collage card on top of it. So I couldn't do straight lines, so
Yeah.
they were kind of broken up and like in different directions and stuff like that. And then I got this pot, and I was like, oh, now I know how I can do flowers, kind of thing. That kind of unlocked something in me. And then I
Yeah.
was doing
Yeah.
all these striped pots. And then I started getting flowers and stuff in them, and I don't know, it was like before I'd done that pot, I just didn't quite know how I was going to approach flowers exactly. And something about that, those stripes on that urn, and handles at different heights and stuff like that, unlocked it for me. And then I was like, oh, flowers is such a great wide subject matter, actually,
Yeah.
because you've got so many different types of flowers, and then you've got so many different types of pots, and and I was really excited by trying to then present flowers in a way which felt new and fresh, um, and exciting to me. I think I'd resisted them because they are such a traditional kind of subject matter in a
Yeah.
way. And then that can be a lovely challenge of like, oh, well, how can I make this something? What can I do with this that feels like me, and that feels exciting to me to work with, and a challenge to get my head around.
Well,
And
that's where the inspiration from Matisse can come in, with the very loose painting style
Mhm.
and very delicate flowers.
Yeah, and Luke as well. And yeah, Luke's inspired. Took a lot of reds and magentas and yellow, use of yellow from Luke's. Because it's funny, I was really quite stuck on green for a while, and in a way, like a bit bored. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
in a bit of a rut with green, and then and that's before these flower works, really. But then looking at Luke's work sort of encouraged me to use more reds and magentas, which then just broadened my palette in a way which I think I was craving.
Yeah.
So it's nice that it's like sort of unlocked a few new avenues. And sometimes I do that with other artists' work. I do like look at their palettes and kind of then try and kind of play with them myself, because there are some colors that I'm like super averse to, like purple and some yellows and pinks, some pinks, not all pinks. Then when you really make a point of kind of doing it and borrowing someone else's palette in a way, it's nice when nice things come out, and
Yeah.
they're fresh for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They feel fresh. So that was pleasing, definitely.
But that goes, that extends into life itself. We'll push away certain things in life, and then all of a sudden, when you do accept them, it opens up a new world for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Brilliant.
Yeah. We get sort of ideas about who we think we are, don't we? And then you sort of have to let that go to become something else.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
But we
that's
cling on
that
to our
progression, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you tend to go, why didn't I do this before? But there was
yeah,
always
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
always that time to do it.
Yeah.
For anyone that isn't able to make the show,
Yeah.
sorry, what is the title of the show?
Oh, it's The Weight of Colour.
Perfect title.
It is great, isn't it? Yeah.
If anyone can't make The Weight of Colour,
Mm-hmm.
where can they see your work, be it online or social media?
Well, my Instagram, I have a website and an Instagram. My Instagram is at Rosa_Roberts_. And then my website is www.rosaroberts.com. And then I think the works for the show will be up on the 99 Projects website by the time of the start of the show. So that's where you can see all of the works that are in this show, The Weight of Colour, with Luke Hannam and myself. So both of our works. So yeah, I think that's going to be ready by the beginning of the show online. So that's, I think, 99projects.co.uk. All the works will be online there come the beginning of the show, and the show is opening on the 9th of July and going on till the 14th.
Rosa, that's all my questions asked. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. That was a really nice chat. Lovely.
That was okay, wasn't it? Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. It's a podcast that's produced with the help of the listener. And if you like what you've heard and you think you might be able to give a little support, there's two ways in which you can do it. If you go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile, you'll find a Linktree drop-down box. And in that box, you'll find two links. One is called Buy Us a Coffee, and it's pretty much that. You can make a one-off payment, the price of a cup of coffee. Or, if you're able and want to do it more long-term, you can become a Ministry of Arts Patreon, where you can sign up to support us on a monthly basis. And 100% of your support goes back into the podcast. And if you're not able to do that, that's absolutely fine. This content is free for everyone. But we would urge you to follow us on your socials and show us a bit of love that way. Either way, thanks for listening and see you next time. Ta-da.